How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to Agave and Cactus Talk. Today we're going to be talking about agave and cactus as we usually do, but we're going to be having them both in one podcast and even a third crop, which is going to be grapes. So today the topic that we're going to be addressing is going to be, can California agave and cactus save California wine and vineyards? Now, obviously, there's a lot of stuff going on in grapes in California today that makes me want to talk about this topic. But let's maybe get into some history, right? To try to put this stuff into perspective. So, when I first came into grapes and vineyard consulting, we were starting to get away from the peak of grapes in California. So the early 2000s, which was the peak of California grapes, essentially combining both, table grapes plus wine grapes, we had an estimated 955,000 acres, right? So close to 1 million acres of planted grapes in California. Now, only 10 years later, the next decade, by 2018, 2020, we had dropped roughly to less than 650,000 acres. So we had dropped over 300,000 acres, roughly a third of acreage, right? And now look at 2025 numbers, right? So we've gone from 650 to now 540,000 acres in 2025, right? So within just a few years, we've dropped over 110. That might, be skewed because obviously reporting, not everybody reports, but say 110, 125,000 acres of grapes have just been taken out in the past, 5 to 6 years. And reading today's, news and stuff like that, you can pretty readily assume that, tens of thousands of acres are continuing to be taken out, and we could potentially even drop now into the 450 range maybe. We still have to see 2026 numbers, obviously, because the year's not over, but it's looking pretty bleak, right? And this is due to so many factors, it's hard to fit in one podcast, but some of these factors can range from, increased water cost, right? So now that Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, aka SGMA, has passed, a lot of people now, their wells are getting meters. They're being charged a fixed cost for the use of the well. They can only pump so much water from, the groundwater. And already, right, when people talk about snowpack and the river, or the snow melting and filling up all of our reservoirs, the snowpack's, pretty light, and we're not able to keep a lot of this reservoirs full throughout the year anymore. So surface water is more expensive, right? So as a farmer, you could get your water from surface water, groundwater, or really cities, I like to call it, right? And there's some other options too, but the groundwater is being more expensive and highly regulated. The surface water has gone up almost double or triple in some regions, like people ask me, why does San Diego have, the first large scale desal plant? It's because they were the furthest along the California aqueduct, so they actually were paying the highest per acre foot for water. It only makes sense that the place where it's most expensive in California to deliver water was the first to put up a desal plant, right? Because it will make the most economical sense for San Diego before any other city, pretty much. And now San Diego is even going to probably get paid for that desal plant by Arizona, because it's like now that extra 8-10% that desal plant is producing for San Diego County allows the Colorado River water that was coming down into that region to stay in Arizona, right? And Arizona is willing to pay for that water. And then you go to city water, which is the most expensive water, they have tiers, and usually you can be paying, compared to surface water, which could be at the moment, depending where you are in California, you know, anywhere from, I'd say, three to even up to $6,000 an acre foot or more. It really, it's highly dependent on your region, right? But city water costs can cost way further than that. People are complaining right now in Little Rock, California, close to me, because a lot of them are not on the grid water, right? So there's no pipes that physically come to their house, and many of them get water basically at this huge fill-up, right? And it used to be, I think, 4 cents a gallon to fill up your water tanks, and you could take, those water tanks to your land, which, if you're not a farmer, surprisingly, a few water tanks go really, really far. If I didn't farm here, with, like say, I could fill up a 265-gallon tote, and I could probably go, 2-3 weeks on that myself with the amount of water that I use. But obviously, my goat herd could probably drink that in a day or two. So, when you have animals and plants, you're obviously going to waste, or I wouldn't call it waste. You're obviously going to spend a lot more water on water, right? But point being, now it went from 4 cents to 10 cents, and people are talking about they're not going to be able to support, their farms and their, homesteads or their homes anymore that are off grid. And this is happening all over California. There's over 1 million Californians. Well, actually, not 1 million. I think it's closer to, it's probably closer to like 500,000 or 600,000. The last time I checked. But this number is the amount of Californians that live with no city water. So no well, no surface water, and no city water, which are pipes, from your county, your city, your water district. For instance, in Altadena, we had the Lincoln Avenue water, that was our water supplier. In Pasadena supplies their own water. In LA, the LA Department of Water and Power supplies that water. You could argue steals that water from the Owens Valley. Go watch Chinatown. But anyway, that's a whole other story. What I'm trying to get you to realize is that, when I took water policy in college, I realized this. Water rights in California are some of the most complicated in the world, because you have conflicting water rights that were inherited from Spain, from England, from the colonies, from California, and so there's different water rights and seniorities and all of that stuff. So I give an example, like Santa Barbara, when I was studying at UCSB, paid for their allocation of the California aqueduct and received zero. So if you paid, you don't pay for the, if you don't pay for the water, even if it doesn't exist, right? Like they could have said, hey, we're not going to receive any water because there's no allocations. We're not going to pay this bill to the California aqueduct people. They could have said that, but then they go down in the seniority list. So essentially they paid, I don't remember how many, millions or whatever for their annual allocation and got zero. So that's why they were talking about at that time putting on their desal plant again, which not many people know that Santa Barbara has one of the earliest desal plants, and they were debating bringing it online. But a huge thing on water that Santa Barbara realized was recycled water. So the largest source of new water that we studied in our water policy classes for the majority of these cities and counties, regions in California is actually going to be recycled water. So instead of building a new dam, instead of building new reservoirs, all of this stuff, if you just figure out how to recycle and filter the current water that you have, many of these cities could have 20, 30, even higher percentages of their water currently, right? So while everyone is out there trying to pump more wells, figure out new rivers to dam up, new aquifers to strip, really recycling is probably the number one way that any region can supplement their water resources significantly, right? And to put that into perspective, California since the 70s has pretty much like, tripled its population. Its economy's fucking exploded. And we've done it with the same water resources that we had since the 70s. In many cases, you could argue those water resources have gotten more expensive and less available, right? So, why am I telling you all this, right? Well, water in California is so fucking complicated. And agave grapes and cactus, can have a crazy relationship on this. So, what do you think the effect on the groundwater, the surface water, all these water systems of 1 million acres of grapes? What is the effect of 500,000 acres of grapes, right? Like the current 540, right? Which may drop, like I told you, to way further, even down to 450,000 acres maybe by next year. But yeah, imagine every single one of those acres requires, some cases, they could be dry farming the grapes, which is fucking amazing. I've worked with some of those farmers, but many of those farmers, especially in the Central Valley and in really hot, arid regions where they're not really receiving natural rainfall to satisfy these grapes, they could be watering, anywhere from 6 inches to even up to 12 inches, Pretty much grapes can take up as much water as a lot of these fruit orchards, and nut orchards, depending on how good, their soil is, all types of factors, right? Because it's like you could be applying tons of water and it not being able to uptake that water, right? So if you got shitty soil management, you could be watering all day your fucking grapes, and them still not getting the water that they require. But the point being that, pretty much the largest crop, and the number one planted crop in California today is grapes. And obviously, they're probably the largest water user, I don't know for sure, right? Nobody's really done the fucking math there probably, or I haven't read about it, but they are one of the top water users in the state, right? So if vineyards and wineries can shift from grapes to agave and cactus, right? Which they're, a much more drought-tolerant plant. And say this, for instance, what would be the effect of 100,000 acres, right, that were taken out just in the last year being put to agave and cactus, right? Because you could be able to grow, prickly pears and agave, and you could be able to use, in many cases, 90 to 99% less water, right? And you can, in many cases, actually get a larger, a larger fruit harvest from your agave and from your cactus than you could from farming grapes. So this one always, like a lot of people, they are getting, on average anywhere from 3 to maybe all the way up to 15, tons of fruit in acre, right, of grapes. And they're producing this for X amount of water, right? Well, what if, for instance, they can get, that same number, because it's pretty similar, on many farms that I've worked with, you can expect, if you're dry farming, if you got a lot of these indigenous agricultural practices, you can easily expect 5 to 20 tons in an acre of prickly pear. But the difference is you also get to have, probably hundreds of thousands or millions of pads, right, that you can create all types of different utility from. You can make paper, you can make fiber products, you could feed cattle, directly. You can make biochar. You can, there's like 1,000 fucking uses, right? You can make clothes, you can make syrups, you can make whatever, it can get really crazy when you start to include that, right? Because if the tonnage of fruit is very similar, right, but you're using 95% less water, you're using, 90 or more percent less labor, because think about all the work it takes. Sometimes you could go $1 million into the vineyard without even fucking like a couple days into planting. You get me? Because you have to prepare the fields a lot of the time. This is not how I consult, right? But saying in general, they prepare the fields by tractor, which can cost sometimes tens of thousands, for just a few acres. They have to, bring in sometimes hundreds of laborers to stake, to plant, to put the little covers, to tie them to the fucking stakes, to prune them, to injertarlos, to what the fuck is that? The grafting, right? So it's like sometimes you could be in with hundreds of laborers weeks and months before even fucking planting. That shit is crazy. ¿Qué pasó, cholo? ¿Qué le hacen a mi cholo? Escóndete, cholo. Sorry, my goats fucking tackled my goat. Or my goats tackled my dog. But, what do you call it? Whereas, somebody that in the rainy season plants cactus in fall, by spring will already have their first fruit in pad production. Whereas grapes, many cases, they literally don't even become really like optimally productive for like a few years. Some people even don't even utilize the first few years, right? And they're just trying to train the grape. So my point is, it's a much faster return. Grapes can be a similar occurrence, but in terms of they're very similar in terms of tonnage, right? That you can get a fruit from every field. And it's real interesting too, right? Because you're using less water, you're using less labor, and you don't need necessarily machines. For a lot of the vineyards, they're using lots of tractors. It depends, I know, like my little brother, he's working on vineyards, managing them, and my dad has, and me too. But it's like my little brother at the moment, he's got an interesting situation because he's helping with a lot of the robots, right, on these large vineyards that are now replacing the labor. They're spraying, they're clearing, they're mowing, they're planting, harvesting, all done by robots. And so that has to do a lot with the expensive labor, not being able to get H-2B imported laborers anymore easily. A lot of these large vineyards are shit out of luck when it comes to their harvest. In many cases, even if you get to the harvest, you can't fucking pick it. And there's like picking prickly pears, in my opinion, is a much easier thing than picking grapes. Like grapes is a very intensive harvesting process when done by hand, and that's why you're paid by usually the amount that you pick, because some people can move really, really quickly and get paid some good wages. Well, getting back to the point here, the grape operation, many of those vineyards and wineries can continue to produce, or the vineyards could stay alive if they planted agave and cactus, and the wineries could continue to produce wine. And sure, I'm not saying everybody is going to be able to benefit from this. We're not going to be able to replace 600,000 acres of grapes with this, and we don't need to. What I was trying to explain earlier is, all these water issues, sure, huge problem for grapes, but right now, distributors have years of supply. The newer generations are drinking 10% of what the older generations are. There's an oversupply not only in California, but in places like South America and Europe, right? Like Italy and France are cutting acreage pretty drastically. California is obviously the biggest probably cutter. There's a lot of pressure onto grapes right now. So it's not just water. I don't want you to think it's just water. But, generally what I'm seeing is people not being able to sell any of their grapes, right? So before, they might have been able to get, a couple thousand per acre, and sometimes even up to 10,000, right, or 20,000 or more. And now nobody wants it, and now their fields are becoming abandoned. And sorry, I got a call. But as we've discussed before, abandoning of the fields is just, causing so many issues, right? So let's look at it from the farmer perspective, right? In 2025, California passed a bill because a lot of this contraction in the grape industry was occurring. And the Grape Growers Association, don't quote me, right? But I believe that they were the one that pitched for this, right? Because they were saying, well, if people are abandoning the fields, they're going to basically create all these pests that are going to destroy the rest of the industry. Which, look, they're actually correct. I'm not hating on the fact that they asked for this. I'm hating in the implementation and the law formation, because here's the backstory to that, right? Say I'm a California vineyard. I'm fucked. Distributors don't want my wine. Nobody wants my fucking grapes. I can't sell shit. I'm going broke and bankrupt. And California sees my abandoned vineyard that I can't sell. And today, the same case in California for grapes is the same case for agave in Jalisco. If they harvest those grapes, they actually lose more money. So they go negative, because they can't sell the grapes. So it actually costs them thousands to harvest that instead of making thousands. Okay, so you got this guy who's completely fucked, and then the state says, we're going to give the power to agricultural commissioners in every county to levy fines and be able to use, this local law enforcement to penalize these abandoned vineyards. So the motherfucker's on the ground and they're just kicking them. They're like, fuck you, And I'm like, dude, that's just going to lead to more abandoned vineyards because you're fining them. You know what I mean? Because they can't clear it. It literally costs them more to clear. So they're going to leave it abandoned. You get me? If now the state stepped in, instead of fining them, said, we'll literally give you fucking money to clear it, that's a whole other story, which they could have gone that route. They went that route with the Del Monte fucking tit suckers over there. They were asking the feds for all those bailouts and shit, and they got it. They said, hey, Del Monte peach, cannery shut down. We want to take out all these peaches and replant something else. Give us the money. And the feds over there, they're like, all right, here you go. Boom. Here you go. Bunch of corporate assholes who don't know to not plant a monoculture and sell to only one client. I mean, I went off on them on the other podcast. I'm not going to do that again. But the point being that that's an approach that would have probably been better than the current one. Not a perfect one. Like I told you, the peach growers, I see that as a corporate bailout. And you have to make sure that the help is actually going towards companies that aren't profiting billions of dollars, right? It's like I give an example. If say the same shit that they did to the peach growers passed, and then they were like, oh, here's hundreds of millions of dollars, Gaio, to continue planting your grapes, or to remove your grapes. It's like, these fuckers make billions of dollars a year. They don't need any subsidies, and they don't need any government aid. Fucking Joe got his leg stuck, and then the dog was over there trying to help him, but the goat's thinking they're going to get killed. Hilarious. Anyways, catch my breath real quick. Yeah, so this abandonment is a huge issue that needs to be discussed way further. It's not just a simple solution of find these guys. And to put it in agave farmer and cactus farmer perspective, the same shit's happening in New Mexico. So essentially, the price of agave is fucking worthless. It costs more to harvest a field than they're going to pay you from it. So you'd actually go negative profit on harvesting a field. So people are just abandoning fields, and the disease is spreading because of these abandoned fields. And it may lead to a situation where I've discussed it several times before, plagues and diseases and weevil have destroyed, anywhere from 20 to 50% of the agave tequiliana crop in Jalisco. And this will happen in Oaxaca as well with espadín because of overproduction as well by these corporate farmers So, agave and grapes are pretty much in the same boat right now. They're pretty worthless, and nobody wants them. So, take that into account, right, as an agave or a grape farmer, because you have to be very fucking innovative if you want to survive. Now, coming back to the point, right, can agave and cactus help these grape growers stay in business, and these vineyards stay in business, or the wineries? Well, on the winery angle, I already explained. You can make wine out of agave, you can make wine out of cactus, you use much less resources and all that, which really doesn't affect the winery, but the fact that they could get it at a cheaper price, or at a affordable price, will definitely affect them, and will incentivize them to want to utilize that crop, right? So that's one thing that I'm seeing that is, maybe exciting, right? Because what if the way to save California wine is to adapt it further, right? I mean, we have California, like the grapes. There's very few grapes that are native to California. Okay, there's like 2 or 3 of them. And the grapes that are mostly planted, 99% are all European crap. Whereas I'm over here growing native agave and cactus to California and producing, like I said, wine out of them. So it's actually my preferred method. I personally don't like drinking spirit. I've experimented a lot with spirits, but I personally don't like drinking spirits like every day, a lot, all the time. I much more prefer wine, and I can personally enjoy it a lot more. So agave wine and agave, or cactus wine has always appealed to me. So I personally, I read a lot of history. I knew about alicoche, I knew about the pitayas, I knew about colonche, I knew about all these different fruits and fruit wines that were made in Mexico, right? This inspired me to do that, obviously, here in the United States, but I didn't know about agave wine until probably like 2 or 3 years ago, when I tried it for the first time from a seller that was selling it here in LA. And they were using agave, I think tequiliana, to produce the agave wine, which I was like super excited about, right? And some shit that appeals to me. And it's really exciting to see agave wine on the market, right? But it's relatively unknown. But I mentioned this could be maybe, help for replacing some of the thousands of acres of grapes being removed, right? Because they're really unprofitable. In California, if you're planting different types of agave and cactus that are native, that really aren't utilized, you're going to be able to get a fair price for them, and especially if you're vertically integrated with a winery, you're going to be able to, keep all the money in that, right? And wine, unlike spirits, caveat, can be directly shipped to consumers, whereas spirits is far more regulated. So thinking, what's more economical and profitable for farmers that are vertically integrated and maybe have a winery, this is still a method over agave spirits, right? Because like a lot of people are like saying like, oh, plant agave if you're, a grape grower and you're fucked. But agave is going to put you in a very similar position if you're making spirits, man. I mean, it's going to be super tough to compete with the Mexicans on producing an affordable, high-quality agave spirit, right? But one thing we can do is take over the newer market of agave wine that really Mexico has slept on, really not cared about, and that could be a way for California to differentiate itself at the beginning, producing large amounts of it, right? And it's something that we wouldn't be directly competing with the Mexicans, because there's no Mexican product that really is taking over the space or dominating the space like that. So it would be real interesting to see how agave wine could be marketed and received in California, right? But it's a good chance to do it right now, because people are not out of love with wine. It's just that demand is changing, and people are seeking newer stuff. And I'll tell you what, I tried some cactus wine out of Texas, right? Don't know the fucking distiller at all, don't know the farm at all, and it was pretty good. And I was just thinking, look, these are some of the new entrants, the people just experimenting. I'm like, when people who have been distillers their whole life in wine, winemakers their whole life get agave and cactus and begin to ferment it, it's gonna be way, way better, dude. So, and I've always said that, right, with my agave spirits, it's like, if I'm a noob-ass fucking distiller, that's, in my opinion, sucks at it, and I can make some good shit, dude, my agave in the hands of a fucking, anyone from the Camarena family, or, like just put a master distiller here, it would be fucking out of this world. You get me? And that's what excites me, right? Because I've tried agave wine and cactus wine. I've made some, and I'm like, wow, this has so much potential. And when the good winemakers and distillers get into it, it's going to get real fucking interesting. Because right now it's a lot of newbies. People who've never distilled, Maybe some exceptions might be the homie Gian over there, who was distilling, lots of other spirits before he got into distilling agave spirits, right? But there's very few people who their career was distilling and just are now getting into agave or cactus, right? But, props to Gian. That's a cool thing too, man. But the other thing I want to discuss here, right? Like, I'm discussing, okay, it's way better on water, it's way better on resources, it's way better on, harvest potential, it's way better, because it is full of water. That also means that when you're distilling it, you're obviously wasting less water, because the cactus fruits and agave could be high in water, right? Versus grapes, which, you need a lot of water to produce wine. And not to say that, it's like a crazy significant decrease from making grape wine to agave or cactus wine, but it is a decrease. And, it's a little bit of a different process. So that's why, the grape makers are going to have to adapt a little bit, but, it's still something that's fairly similar to them, because it still is creation of wine, even though it's a different type of wine, right? I mean, there's people working on blueberry wine, all types of different wines around the United States that find their niche and really sell some really high-quality shit, So that's why I recommend this. But the point that I was trying to make here is that imagine the economic downfall of losing hundreds of thousands of acres of grapes planted in California, right? And each of these acres making thousands and thousands of dollars for these farmers. You're talking about multi-billions of dollars that have been wiped out of the agriculture economy of California by these grape growers and vineyards pulling back. And, a lot of this land is being fallowed, right? And if we can take fallowed land out because they say, hey, we don't have the water to make these grapes profitable, we don't have the clients to sell them. Well, if they could produce agave and cactus and get it to the point of harvest without any water, with very low labor, very low resources, the same land, then they might have hope to stay in business and continue doing what the fuck they've been doing, just in a little different way. Because imagine all the rural communities are usually smaller communities. This agricultural money is much more significant to them. I'll give an example. We have thousands of acres actually planted here in LA County still. People don't really realize that the Antelope Valley is this huge agricultural hub in LA County, producing a lot of the alfalfa for the animals in the area, the vegetables for the people in the area, right? Especially root crops like onions, carrots, that shit, and leafy greens. Well, to LA, it's not such a big deal to maybe develop a lot of these farms, because we have Hollywood, we have, the tech industry, we have real estate, we have so much industries, right? The aerospace industry, aviation industry, like all these industries are here in LA. Okay, farming, if you lose it, not so bad, you got the other ones. Now, to a rural community in the Central Valley, all they have is fucking farming, dude. Like, you know what I mean? Many of these communities, all they have are these farms to provide modes of careers and jobs and shit, right? So to lose that, imagine how many people went unemployed. Imagine how many people lost their job and couldn't find another one. or got a part-time when they had a full-time that paid well at these wineries, right? I've worked in the winery space. I knew immigrants earning 50, 60 an hour. I mean, you know, these are places that you go up based on your skill. You get me? You prove yourself. Man, I knew fucking 18-year-olds driving tractors earning 40 an hour. You get me? Like, we don't give a fuck about your education. We give a fuck about your work ethic on farms. And many times, you know, a farm that's you know, profiting heavily, I mean, dude, they are just asking for as many laborers as possible, right? So, to lose these places of employment, huge issues. And we can take all these lands back and plant them with agave and cactus. And here's what I was saying earlier, right? Like, not only can you produce the wine and get similar harvests for all these less inputs, you can also utilize the agave and cactus to make all types of paper and thousand products, right? You can make biofuels, right? Like, there's billions of dollars going into biofuels in California and on the federal level in the United States. We could produce them here out of those crops, dry farm them with no water, and produce energy sources. It's really incredible what these plants could do. So you could still continue doing the wine and have 3, 4, 5 other side businesses with the plant. You know, it's really cool. And that's where I say not only can it help save a portion of California's grape industry, or you know, it wouldn't, you know, maybe help the grape industry so much for 100,000 acres of agave and cactus to be planted, but it would help the farmers and the winery makers. Which at the end of the day, it's like this. It's like, look, these grape fools are going to go out of business. Do you want them to stay in business doing something different, or to fail completely? And here's the other thing. I've worked with lots of vineyards, and I've been able to be like, look, you have 100 acres of grapes. Maybe they're unprofitable. Maybe you don't want to utilize them for now, but you for sure can't just sell them on the market. Why don't you start producing maybe some grapeseed oil, and then, you know, you keep 20 acres, and then you know, or you remove 20 acres, and then you put some agave and cactus. So it's like, maybe that could be the breathing room, you get me, to continue doing that too. Because many of these farms are just looking for extra input to get over this hump of the grapes going to shit, right? I mean, there's families that have been farming grapes in California, like the winery that, you know, I really loved, right? And me and my family worked with, Charles Krug. One of the oldest, I think it actually is the oldest winery up in Napa. You get me? Dude, I think they have like 5 or 6 generations of family working that winery. You get me? And they're going through this too, right? But what if planting some agave and cactus could bring in to their existing wine customers a new agave and cactus wine? And that might give them some breathing room to get over this hump while everybody that's going to go bankrupt goes bankrupt. And say 10 years from now we're left with 400,000 acres or 300,000 acres. But those farmers are going to have places to put their grapes. They're going to have distributors wanting their grapes. They're going to have, you know, learn to implement sheep and regenerative and indigenous agricultural models to bring their costs down and all of that. Like, my point is, the guys that survive and women are going to be very innovative farmers and winemakers. And this may be one of the innovations that keeps them alive to continue doing their shit, right? Because you already have the wine clientele, right? But maybe they're not looking for the grape wine because you can find it everywhere for cheap as fuck because there's an oversupply, right? Like I told you at the distributor base. And they got warehouses full of this shit. So that's why it's so cheap at the moment. Well, maybe now they can bring in this agave and cactus wine at a little bit higher price and make a little bit more profit. And, you know, now the distributors want it because they're making more profit. Now you can sell it. Like, there's lots of opportunity. You get me? And that's really what I want, you know, people to realize, that the agave and cactus could help the grape farmers in many ways, not just trying to replace their way of life. I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to give them more life. You know what I mean? And in many cases, that is, you know, how it is. You know, it's not an or thing. It's an and thing, you know. And yeah, really, grape growers could significantly benefit from planting large amounts of agave and cactus, And, I've discussed before how, the grapes are one of the largest users of water in California. And that if you got significant grape acreage to go to agave and cactus, the right agave and cactus, right? It can't be Tequiliana, obviously. You're going to have the same aquifer pressures. It's stupid. But if you choose USA native species, if you choose strong drought-tolerant species, right? Then you're going to be able to produce the same shit you were before, the wine, much cheaper, much higher quality that you can sell for, much more niche that you can sell for much higher price. And you're going to still, right? You got all that going on. But at the same time, you're going to be making money from all these other ways with the plant, right? Like, in I guess going to the water thing here, right, which was my goal. You could significantly save an extraordinary amount of water. Like, I'm talking about, like, I did a calculation where if you got 100,000 acres of grapes to go to agave and cactus, you could potentially save as much water as is allocated to all of Southern California, basically, through the Colorado River. So Southern California doesn't get all its water from the Colorado River, but places like LA, receive, hundreds of acres foot from that river, and or of acre feet from that river. I think the allocation in California is 7.5 million acre feet, and LA receives, a large portion of that. Well, large portions of this water that is imported to California could be completely stopped if we, used the places in Southern California, like here in the Southern Central Valley and in the desertic regions, right? Like Riverside Valley, where there's a lot of alfalfa farmers that receive that Colorado River water. You could potentially get these people to plant agave and cactus and keep the water in the river or give it to another state upstream. Like, this would provide so much water for California, it may alleviate pressure for other farmers to not have to cut back as much, or put less pressure on the aquifers so that more farmers stay in business for longer in several of these water stressed regions, right? It could be a really, really significant thing for water resources in California to go this way, right? Because you're taking a water-loving crop planted mostly in arid regions, and you're taking an arid region crop that could be dry farmed in most of these regions, and then, the water savings is just going to be fucking enormous. We're talking about, like I said, some of these farms use, when they measure their water, it's not in millions of gallons, it's in acre feet. And 1 acre foot, I think, is like 365,000 gallons, but farms, they talk about they're using hundreds of acre feet. It's like, or you call it, dozens of acre feet. It's like they could be using millions upon millions of gallons of water. So providing a way for them to continue to stay in business while using less water also allows more water to go to the cities, to the environment. That's where farming usually gets a bad rap. It's like, oh yeah, 80% of water in California goes to agriculture. Yeah, 80% of the shit that's left, because like 40% of that shit goes directly to the environment. So we're capturing the 80% of the 60% that's left. You know what I mean? So when you really look at it, like, what's 80% of 60? I don't know, like 48% or some shit. So it's like California farmers, they're actually probably using half of the water that's estimated, but it's because they're not looking at the whole picture, right? They're saying we use 80% of the water that's left after it's allocated towards the environment. But when you look at the whole picture, it's not so bleak. But we're not saints either. We use a lot of water, and we can we can improve in lots of ways. But yeah, I guess the point of this podcast was really to open your mind up a bit about how maybe grapes, this trouble that they're going through, they might want to adapt. And what inspired this podcast is, I've been talking about this, that I wanted to talk about this for a long time already on the podcast. And I've mentioned several times, like, different ways that it could benefit, this interchange of agave and cactus for the grapes. But I wanted to maybe flesh out some of those points here today. But the thing that inspired it a little bit was that the UC Cooperative Extension is having a grapes and agave program where they're going to be talking about grapes and agave, right? So I was like, damn, that's a good one. Actually, I've been meaning to talk about. Let me update this podcast right now so that I can get that info out to people. But I think grape growers today are going through a enormous change. The ones that are left are going to be extremely adaptive, vertically integrated companies that don't depend on one mode of selling, because kind of like what happened to the peach growers with Del Monte, a lot of the vineyards, like a large majority, are like that. You get me, where they only sell to one winery, which means that when that winery says, we don't need your grapes, they're essentially fucked, So they can't put themselves in that position anymore. And a lot of these vineyard plus winery operations are actually the ones continuing to stay in business, because they have the winery produced with their own grapes, so obviously huge savings there. But when you do that, you could be your own distributor and sell your own wine on site, or to people in small quantities and stuff, direct to mail and shit. And as of recent, since Corona, right, before you couldn't ship wine. But that's a huge advantage over the spirits market, right? But anyways, the ones surviving are trying all types of stuff, man. I mean, they're opening up tours, they're getting animals to try to have, like, fucking petting zoos. Like, you'd be surprised at the amount of shit that I've heard wineries and vineyards putting on their properties to try to continue to bring these crowds in, to continue to make sales during this tough time in the grape industry, right? But I think now that agave and cactus is starting to have a little bit of some interest in California, is the time to say, okay, now that we've taken hundreds of acres of grapes out, what's next? And many of these people saying what's next, agave and cactus is a great what's next, because they're already familiar with how to grow grapefruit. They're already familiar with how to process that fruit. They're already familiar with consumers wanting wine. They're already familiar with the distributors. This industry, they could just butt in and be like, whoop, here I go. Let me insert myself right there. It's like they have a lot of opportunity to shift the game for them and make this change actually benefit them. What if California becomes the world center of cactus wine or agave wine? You never know, dude, right? And I was reading about the Italian agave farmers the other day, right? And I had told this guy that was Angelo Greco, I think his name is. He's starting up a farm, and he's got, I think, 1,500 C. Solana from the article I read, planted. And, I told him, I'm like, that's a fiber agave. I know you're trying to make spirits, but, it doesn't have the greatest pinas. You'll get more return if you make wine, That's one thing that I was thinking, and I was just like, let me tell him, I was like, I actually think in the Italian market, you're over here trying to make spirits, but I'm like, everybody in Italy already fucking loves wine. If you make agave wine, this would be much more readily accepted in Italy. You get me? So Italy might go that route that I'm telling everybody, right? Because they're in the same position of their grape industry, in many ways collapsing, right? So it's still going to be there, but it's going to be 50% there, or 60 or 70% there, right? So there's huge gaps that they need to fill. But I had consulted with a few Italian farmers, and one thing that I told them was to invest in fiber, right? And producing clothes and stuff, because Italy's a fashion center, right? Well, the same thing here in California. It's like you could be making your wine of cactus or agave, and still be producing clothes or fashion products from it, and or rags or paper napkins. Dude, there's incredible amount of fucking things you can do with this plant, right? So whether it's Italy, California, I think grape growers can that have been getting the short end of the stick the past 10 years, this might be a way for them to come back on the market and continue doing what they've been fucking doing, just in a little different way, right? So, yeah, I'm sure there's lots of other stuff I want to talk about this, but, I gotta go walk the goats, and I don't want to, it's super windy today, so I don't want to make the podcast extremely long. If I think of some other shit, maybe I'll make a part 2, but the concept of this thing was can agave and cactus help, the collapsing California grape industry and in general agriculture? And I think we've answered that. The answer is a fucking definite yes. You get me? And I gave you a little history of why it's such a bad industry to be in right now, grapes, and and how some of it relates to agave and cactus, that industry nuances and stuff. But I think we've shown today, or I've shown today to you, that these two plants, agave and cactus, or two plant families, we'll call it, can really help these grape growers and in general agriculture in California, because of their potential to add to the economics, and it really is going to get exciting soon. So I hope you learned something maybe today about water or grapes or agave or cactus or whatever. But this is a topic that's been coming up a lot, and I just wanted to quickly dive in on it. So if you got any questions, obviously leave them in the chat down under, and we'll try to get to them. If you got any topics or people you want me to, Cholo, come down, that you want me to, interview or talk about, let me know, and we'll try to get them on. I mean, can't promise shit, but, if it's a topic, I could definitely talk about it. But, if you want me to get, like, Mike Tyson, it's, like, not happening. You get me? And you probably wouldn't be a good host or whatever, but just a stupid example, right? What was I going to say? One other thing, I'm going to be bringing out a podcast soon on the California Agave Alliance, but I do want to mention quickly that we've opened up membership, and you can join, and it's free. So visit californiagavealliance.com if you want to become a member and start being part of the community and learning here with us in California. And one mention that I'll mention in that podcast as well is that you could be in Mexico, Europe, Africa, whatever you want, and still be a part of our group and learn with us and teach us and be a part of the community. So look forward to seeing some of y'all there. Sorry. Look forward to seeing y'all in the group and learning and being a part of the community. But we'll do a podcast solely for that soon, because I have some stuff I want to talk about and all that. But have a great rest of the day, everyone, and Agave and Cactus Talk out. Catch you on the next one.